comments. Hey, glad you're here. Hope some of the regulars show up. I'm going to wait a couple seconds before I start talking. But how was everybody's weekend? Happy Monday. You guys, I was good this time. I actually took like notes. I didn't read the whole dissent, but I read the whole case, the new Supreme Court case we're going to be talking about. Hey, yes, King of the Hunt. Okay, I'm so excited you guys are here. Pornhub was down in Virginia. What do you mean down? I'm interested in hearing what you mean. Okay, I'm actually excited about today's topic because I'm well prepared, which doesn't happen often. Had a great weekend, started on Plato's Dialogues. Oh, I was re-looking at that, I want to say a few months ago. And I still have to do like the last one. All right, cool. New legislative action. I have to look this up really quick now. I have to see what's happening in Virginia with Pornhub. But we have a lot to go over, so I'm just going to look at this really quickly. Oh, okay. So it's the same thing that they did with, I forgot what other state it was. So there are age verification laws. So Pornhub is kind of like protesting by removing access in Virginia. So blocking Virginia. Moderator, Louisiana and Utah. Okay. Good memory. This is going to be insane tonight. Let's go get it. Okay, you're right. So porn stuff's super interesting, but we have a lot to talk about. So first thing I want to say is today's Monday Fun Day and VPN time. Hey, Veronica, I'm happy you're here. And so after this, I'm going to go straight on my OS and we're going to do a very different stream. And I think today will be like the pinnacle of like this dualistic approach I have to being on the internet, where we're going to go super deep into law, affirmative action, 14th Amendment, and then we're going to go straight to me getting naked. And I have no bra on, this shirt is see-through, and you know, we got the little matching panties and we're going to go from there. So anyway, if that's your thing, go to jasminejafar.me and you'll know the link. All right. Enough talking. So as many of you have probably heard, our Supreme Court has effectively struck down affirmative action. Wait, where's your special guest? Oh, my sister, she didn't want to do it. She's actually like downstairs over there. She's like, I get nervous. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll convince her in the future. Do you like to collaborate with porn star actor for your content? No. Okay, guys, it's not about porn. All right. Her laws. No, she's actually great. She actually gave me this idea. She's like, you should talk about this. And I thought about it before, but I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. She doesn't even want to like she was gonna even do like her own TikTok, and then she was like, I tried it and I was just so nervous. Like she's like, I'm scared. She like freezes. So I'm like, okay. But anyways, let's get into affirmative action and students for fair admissions versus president and fellows of Harvard. So this what actually don't know exactly what day that did, but it's very recent. And UNC and Harvard, which is University of North Carolina and Harvard, were the schools that the Students for Fair Admissions, which has been an organization that has been fighting affirmative action for a minute, sued on the basis of it violating the 14th Amendment, which the 14th Amendment, no state shall deny to any person the equal protection of the laws. So this is also always been heavily embedded with race. This is what was used in Brown v. Board of Education, Loving v. Virginia, this idea that you cannot deny people the same rights based on race. So we're going to look at this case. Don't fuck with Asian parents. It was last Thursday, I think. Yeah. So we're going to look at this case and I want you to hear what you guys think, because I actually am not fully decided on it. And I read the whole majority opinion. I didn't read the concurring opinions. I read about half or maybe more of Sotomayor's dissent. So, but I do know the actual opinion really well. And I wish I had time to finish reading the dissent because I wanted to hear all of those arguments. Will we also get into legacies? We can, because that is a part of it. I guess not a huge part, but a part nonetheless. So one, I think it's important that we talk about how these admissions were, how Harvard does its admissions, and UNC I think follows a similar approach. But they talk about it in the case, and I literally pasted it. So I'm going to go through this process, and yes, I know I didn't read his dissent either. I know. And I wish I did, but you guys, the whole thing, if you were to read everything, it was 257 pages. And I just don't have that fucking kind of time. So I read the whole majority, and then I read a lot of Sotomayor's, which was Kagan was on that one too. And that's also the one that the court, the majority opinion seemed to address a little bit more, although they didn't spend a lot of time on it. And I think there are places where the majority's weak, and I think there are places where the dissent is weak. And I really want to know what you guys think. So first, let's talk about how Harvard, there's a lot to talk about. Okay. How Harvard, how the application process works. So each application for admission is initially screened by a first reader who assigns a numerical score in each of 6 categories: academic, extracurricular, athletic, school support, personal, and overall. For the overall category, a composite of 5 other ratings, a first reader can and does consider an applicant's race. So the first thing that they do is they screen for those categories, and 1 out of those 6 categories, race can be a factor in that category. So that's how that works. Harvard's admissions subcommittees then review all applications from a particular geographic area. These regional subcommittees make recommendations to the full admissions committee, and they take the application's race into account. When the 40-member full admissions committee begins its deliberations, it discusses the relative breakdown of applicants by race. The goal of this process, according to Harvard's director of admissions, is ensuring there is no dramatic drop-off in minority admissions from the prior class. An applicant receiving a majority of the full committee's votes is tentatively accepted for admission. At the end of this process, the racial composition of the tentative applicant pool is disclosed to the committee. The last stage of Harvard's admissions process, called the LOP, LOP, winnows the list of tentatively admitted students to arrive at the final class. Applicants that Harvard considers cutting at this stage are placed on the LOP list, which contains only 4 pieces of information: legacy status, recruited athlete status, financial aid eligibility, and race. In the Harvard admissions process, race is a determinative tip for a significant percentage of all admitted African American and Hispanic applicants. Okay. Was that, did that, sometimes just reading, but I feel like that was the best way to just do it, because they had that little paragraph that just explains how they're doing the process. And now we can get into the case. So does this violate the 14th Amendment? Essentially, does considering race in an application violate the 14th Amendment, which is that no state shall deny to any person equal protections of the law? So first thing I want to say here is anytime race is involved in an equal protection case, or pretty much in general, it triggers strict scrutiny. And I've talked about this before, but strict scrutiny is the highest level of scrutiny that a court will employ when deciding whether to strike something down as unconstitutional or uphold it. So I talked about how there's strict scrutiny, and race, national origin, alienage, and religion, I think, are the 4 that trigger strict scrutiny. Gender is intermediate. Then there's intermediate scrutiny, and then rational basis review. In general, this is not always the case, but in general, things that this court is looking at with strict scrutiny, obviously, because it's a much higher standard to meet, get shut down more frequently than things that are looked at under rational basis review. It's very easy to pass rational basis review. It's not easy to pass strict scrutiny. So what is strict scrutiny? Strict scrutiny, there has to be a compelling government interest. So this is very different than rational basis review. It just has to be kind of any interest that's at least reasonable, but compelling. So it has to be a very important, sorry, I haven't been looking at this. Yes, we are talking about the decision on affirmative action. All right, I'm trying not to look at the chat too much while I go over like just this stuff, and then once I'm talking about something in particular, and I want your guys' input on this because I honestly don't know how I feel about this case. So, strict scrutiny must be further a compelling government interest, and it must be narrowly tailored to that interest. So it has to be the least restrictive means of achieving that compelling interest, meaning it can't be overbroad. I can't be like, my compelling government interest is to ensure the safety of citizens so nobody can leave their house. You know, like that's a really crazy example, but that is not the least restrictive means. That is not what is necessary to achieve that interest. That's clearly overbroad. So does that make sense? Yes, I am streaming on OnlyFans after this, which will be a very different stream. But this is for people who either like this content or who like both. And you know, I got my regulars in here, so I'm happy to see you guys. So they go through the majority first goes through history of the 14th Amendment, and one distinction you see between the majority and at least Sotomayor's dissent, I didn't read the other one, is that the majority focuses a lot on how race can't be used to discriminate and you know or to separate anything and everything. Basically, the majority takes a colorblind approach, and Sotomayor discusses that, which I'm going to get into, and I have some quotes from her. She talks about how it's about racial equality, but it's not about being colorblind. And she says that, like, you know, Brown was really used to say that what the goal here is an integrated school system. That's the goal. And she, you know, we'll get into that in a second. I don't want to digress too much. But anyway, so they talk about that for a minute, and then they talk about the history of affirmative action. So there was a case, I don't know actually when this one is back, I think BAKKE. I've never read this case. And there was no majority, like it was 6 different opinions. So this was a very like, just, what's the word? It was very scattered. There didn't seem to be, yes, affirmative action. Okay, I'm not going to read opinions just yet. But it had a lot of parts to it. But basically, overall, the opinion said that it struck down some of the reasons, or it was not persuaded by some of the reasons that were given for why they should be able to consider race, except for one. And the compelling interest that they found was that obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a racially diverse student body. So Justice Powell, who was writing that opinion, found the interest to be a constitutionally permissible goal for an institution of higher education, which was entitled as a matter of academic freedom to make its own judgments as to the selection of its student body. So the race of an applicant may tip the balance in his favor, just as geographic origin or life experience may in the balance in other candidates' cases. A farm boy from Idaho, this is what Harvard said. So this is what the brief that they filed with the court. A farm boy from Idaho can bring something to Harvard College that a Bostonian, is that how you say it? People from Boston cannot offer. Similarly, a Black student can usually bring something that a white student cannot offer. I don't know how to use split screen yet, guys. So, and some of the other, so they gave up like a number of reasons, and one of them was to remedy past societal discrimination. So Powell didn't find that compelling. I think 4 of the other justices did. So that was part of the case, but they did say it's not unlimited. So they said race can only be considered a plus and weighed in a manner flexible enough to consider all pertinent elements of diversity in light of the particular qualifications of each applicant. So they said they still have to take a holistic approach. Then we had the case Grutter v. Bullinger. I don't know if I'm butchering these, in 2003. And in this case, it was confirmed student body diversity is a compelling interest, okay? Obtaining the education that benefits that flow from a racially diverse student body, they said it's a compelling interest. But they also confirmed the limitations that the previous case had, and they also discussed two of the main dangers with allowing race to be considered a factor. So number one, illegitimate illegitimate stereotyping and like having it be a negative. So um they want it to just be used as a plus and not like as a negative, and the majority is going to talk about this in the majority opinion. The other thing is illegitimate stereotyping, so believing that minority students consistently express some characteristic minority viewpoint on any issue. Number two is so those were the two. So not just a plus, but as a negative, to discriminate against those not of that race. Sorry, I like wrote it weird in my notes. And I also added a third thing. So they reaffirmed those two limitations and kind of like reiterated some of the dangers with this and said that, hey, this is dangerous. We're proceeding with caution, but there is a compelling enough interest to allow this to happen, but we got to be careful. And so one thing that they said is there has to be an endpoint at some time. This was in Grutter. At some point, this has to end. This can't go on forever. And they said that they think it'll be in about like 25 years. That isn't a hard rule, but they said we predict. That was like a prediction that they made. Well, this was in 2003, so it has been about 20 years. And the majority says, well, there's no end in sight. Doesn't seem like this is going to end in the next 5 years. So the court looks at all this and it says, all right, looks like we have 3 criteria that Harvard and UNC have to meet in order for us to uphold this or for it to be constitutional. Number one, it has to pass strict scrutiny, right? Because it's 14th Amendment and it's race. So it has to be a compelling government interest and has to be narrowly tailored. The means they use to achieve that interest have to be narrowly tailored and be the least restrictive means to achieve that goal. All right, let me see if, are you guys still here? Are you guys just just listening to me? Okay, good. If not, I'm just talking to myself. But number 2, race can't be used as a negative in the sense that it's like a negative part of your application. It can only be used as a positive or like a little plus. All right, perfect. You guys are here. And number 3, it must end at some point. So those, thank you guys. So those are the 3 things that they say that Harvard and UNC have to show in order for this to be upheld. And they said it failed on all accounts. So why? Let's look at strict scrutiny. So Harvard gave, and I guess UNC too. I'm just going to keep saying Harvard, but this case was kind of about both of those schools. The reasons that Harvard gave for why they want to consider race on applications. Number 1, promoting the robust exchange of ideas. Number 2, broadening and refining understanding. Number 3, fostering innovation and problem solving. And number 4, preparing engaged and productive citizens and leaders. Oh, I guess number 5. I guess there's 5. Enhancing appreciation, respect, and empathy, cross-racial understanding, and breaking down stereotypes. So, I mean, some of these are pretty much reiterations of the compelling interests that were previously given in Grutter, and I'm just going to say Bouquet. I don't know how the fuck to say Bukke. They said none of these are compelling. So they overruled kind of the precedent, because those cases said that, you know, a diverse student body is compelling. They're like, nope, it's not. And I don't like this. They said it's hard to measure they said it's too hard to measure any of these to even apply strict scrutiny. And when will they end? You can't tell. I think Sotomayor rightly points out that they just made this up, in the sense of a compelling government interest doesn't have to be very clearly measurable. Like, not that's never been a rule. I'm sure you can conceive of some compelling government interest that you can't test or measure for, but nonetheless, they write, how is a court to know whether leaders have been adequately trained, whether the exchange of ideas is robust, or whether new knowledge is being developed? So they're like, this is just too loosey-goosey, essentially. I don't have a better word for it. it's not precise enough for us to even apply strict scrutiny. They do compare it to other instances where they have allowed race, like racial races to be treated, I guess, differently, or for things to be implemented on the basis of race. An example is comparing it to the temporary racial segregation of inmates after a riot in prison or in jail. Like, I don't know much about this, but I'm assuming that these prisoners get into conflict and it gets dangerous and they're in these gangs, and maybe these gangs are based on race. So separating them by race, they have allowed for the compelling interest of preventing harm to these prisons. So they write, but the question of whether, so they're like, compared to the temporary racial segregation of inmates will prevent harm to those in prison. But the question whether a particular mix of minority students produces engaged and productive citizens or effectively trains future leaders is standardless, even if these goals could somehow be measured. Moreover, how is a court to know when they have been reached and when the perilous remedy of racial preferences may cease? There's no particular point at which there exists sufficient innovation and problem solving, or students who are appropriately engaged and productive. Finally, the question in this context is not one of no diversity or of some. It is a question of degree. How many fewer leaders Harvard would create without racial preferences, or how much poorer the education at Harvard would be, are inquiries no court could resolve. So that's the first thing they said. And they also said that it's also not narrowly tailored. They said the goals and the goal and the means in which they go about achieving those goals are not sufficient enough to be the least restrictive means, or narrowly tailored, or even be, I guess they're saying, linked thoroughly enough. So they say it's overbroad. So for instance, they give the example like Asian. They're not distinguishing between East Asian or South Asian. So I guess as long as one is enough to compensate for the other, I guess that they're saying that like that's kind of not very rational way to look at it. They're saying Hispanic is overbroad. I think they make the example of like they'd rather have 15% of Mexican students than I guess 10% of Latin American students, because 15% is, but like, you know, they're just going through shit like that. They do mention that I do agree with this one. They do mention there's no category for Middle Eastern people. And I've always hated this because I'm Middle Eastern. My parents are, I'm Persian. And on like, anytime I'm filling out my race, I have to put white, and I don't identify really as white. But that's what I'm considered. Sometimes they'll have white and they'll put under Caucasian/European or Middle Eastern. And then I obviously check Middle Eastern. But for a long time, like I'm like, everyone has a like separate spot except us. Like, you know, that includes people from the entire Arab world. And I'm like, really? I don't think Osama bin Laden is considered white. I'm not saying that, I'm not connecting myself to him, but I feel like we are definitely a distinct minority group. And I don't know the reason they consider us white and me. Okay, like I guess, but there are some I consider most Middle Eastern people to be like brown. So anyways, I digress. Okay, I already talked about that. All right, any questions so far? Okay, I can't wait to read these. I guess we can talk about that part first. Or actually, let me get through number 2. Let me just get through these and then the majority opinion, and then I want to hear what you guys think. Number 2, so they're saying doesn't pass strict scrutiny. We don't find any of these interests to be compelling, and we don't find the means they use to achieve these interests to be narrowly tailored and connected. Number 2, they're saying that this is inevitably being used as a means of stereotyping, and it is negatively impacting applications. And this negatively impacting applications, I agree with. So they're saying it's zero sum, advantage at the expense of the other. And they're like, this has been shown that there's been 11.1% decrease in Asians since with affirmative action. They write, while admissions officer may give a preference to applicants likely to excel in the Harvard Radcliffe Orchestra, Harvard explains that, so this is what Harvard says. that does not mean it is a negative not to excel at a musical instrument. So they're saying, hey, like Harvard's saying, look, just because we're giving you like a plus if you're like an athlete, it doesn't mean that if you're not an athlete, we're giving you like you get docked a point. And I agree with this. They say the court says, but on Harvard's logic, while it gives preferences to applicants with high grades and test scores, that does not mean it is a negative to be a student with lower grades and test scores. This understanding of the admissions process is hard to take seriously. College admissions are zero sum. A benefit provided to some applicants, but not to others, necessarily advantages the former group at the expense of the latter. So I agree with this, unless it's a case where like it's looked at as like and I think Harvard is showing that it kind of is to a degree. And I think if they just added it, like, you know, at the end, there are people that are like on the fence, and you know, that is also usually where they're saying they look at legacy, blah 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 blah. Maybe it's used there, but I don't see how it can be used as a plus if it's not going to negatively impact the people who don't have that plus. I think it is kind of zero sum. But so in that argument, I do agree. It is, if two people are equal and you're accepting the Black student over the Asian student, then the Asian student is going to be disadvantaged. Their advantage is their disadvantage. So I think that's compelling. Let me know what you guys think though. And well, my sister wants to go use the pool again, I guess. So where was I? They also are like, oh, Harvard says that, like, you know, it doesn't have a huge impact. We don't use a lot of it, but I also agree with this, but they're like, at the same time, they're saying that the demographics of their admitted students would meaningfully change if race-based admissions were abandoned. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. Either it's being used or it's not being used. You can't say it's not being used that much, but then saying that this kind of decision is going to meaningfully change your student body. The stereotyping one, I'm not as much of a fan of. And I'll explain why. So stereotyping. They're saying that when a university admits students on the basis of race, it engages in the offensive and demeaning assumption that students of a particular race, because of their race, think alike. Such stereotyping is contrary to the core purpose of the Equal Protection Clause. They're saying it argues that race in itself tells you something about who you are, and that people of a certain race think differently than people of another race, right? Because if you're saying we're admitting this because we want a diverse student body, they're saying that, and we know Black people bring that to us because their race, I guess, has to mean that they are bringing some sort of viewpoint or experience that is different than that of I guess, white students. I see, but the thing is, that's what the whole, like, people of a different socioeconomic class have the experience of being in a different socioeconomic class, and you're allowed to use that. You know, it's just not consistent because your experience as a member of a particular race does. I don't think they're saying that you all think the same, but that you bring something different and they're like, well, you can't say that you bring something different just because of your race. But I think that if you look at it like the holistic approach, like, you're not saying they all think the same or that they think differently than people of other races. I think you're saying that they bring an experience as a member of a minority race that obviously is people who don't have that experience can't bring. So that one I find less compelling. So they say, we have time and again forcefully rejected the notion that government actors may intentionally allocate preference to those who may have little in common with one another but the color of their skin. The entire point of the Equal Protection Clause is that treating someone differently because of their skin color is not like treating them differently because they are from a city or from a suburb or because they play the violin poorly or well. So they're really using this like, well, that's different. If you're treating someone differently because of how well they play the piano or because they're rich and poor, that's not like treating someone differently because of their race. But I think if you're looking at it from the sense of you're trying to create diversity, then whether you want people that are poor and you want people that are rich and you want people of different races, different genders, different backgrounds. But let me know what you guys think. Okay, I'm gonna pause. Well, there's only one more, that third prong, and then the conclusion, and then I want to end it there before we talk about the part of the dissent that I read. So also, they're like, well, also, there's no endpoint. There is no endpoint in sight, and it's supposed to. So um, they're like, how do we figure this out? What proportional goal needs to be reached? So they talk about how Harvard suggests that the end of race-based admissions programs will occur once meaningful representation and diversity are achieved on college campuses. Such measures of success amount to little more than comparing the racial breakdown of the incoming class and comparing it to some other metrics, such as the racial makeup of previous incoming class or the population in general, to see when some proportional goal has been reached. And the second endpoint that they talked about was when students receive the educational benefits of diversity, which I agree. When the fuck is that? It is unclear how the court is supposed to determine if or when such goals would be adequately met. I don't even like the endpoint thing. Like, I don't even like that there has to be an endpoint. And I also agree, though, like, when would the endpoint be? I don't know. So if we're going to have that as a requirement, I do think it's a fair criticism to say, like, I don't know how we would measure that. Okay, conclusion. They also do say, though, so they're taking it out, but they're like, nothing prohibits universities from considering an applicant's discussion of how race affected the applicant's life, so long as the discussion is concretely tied to a quality of character or unique ability that the particular applicant can contribute to the university. Many universities have for too long wrongly concluded that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not the challenges bested, skills built, or lessons learned, but the color of their skin. The nation's constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. So that's that. That I like, if you're like, oh, you could talk about in your essay how it is tied to your character or unique ability or blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah, because it is tied to all those things. So yeah, anyways, that is what the court said. So that is now our new rules. We can't use race in college admissions. So I'm going to go through some of the comments. Now is the time where you guys can kind of let me know what you think, and then we'll go through. I didn't read the concurrence. This shit was so long. Thomas had a really long concurrence, Gorsuch. And I don't even know exactly what they differed in. Okay, so I'm going to start at yes, affirmative action. I'm going up. Affirmative action is racist. People of the left demonstrate serious hyper-racism when they imply things like they just won't have a chance unless we help them via affirmative action. Or, of course, all POCs have to vote Democrat. Lots of POC are highly intelligent and don't need help to get in. It's hard work even discussing this feels racist. I get what you're saying, but I don't think it's like anyone who says all POCs have to vote Democrat. I think that's a very different claim, and one that many proponents of affirmative action don't make. Like, I don't think people who are like, hey, there has been inequality in the past, and it's important to a student body colleges are like the foundation of where ideas are discussed and like kind of like the marketplace of ideas. And the best way to actually engage in that is if we bring in people from varying backgrounds, varying experiences, especially ones that reflect our actual lives and the real world in our society. I think people who are saying that are not also usually saying that. You're taking one claim that people on the left generally make, and you're tying it in with a very extreme claim that a much smaller portion of the left make, and those, like, there may be some overlap, but there's also not a lot of it, in my opinion. Okay. Problem is that two equally eligible the problem is that two equally eligible applicants, one white, one non-white, at a significant portion of the time, the white applicant will be accepted over the non-white. No, I think this is that it's not like the opposite is now true. Like, if you're looking at a black and a white person, they're going to take the white person. They're saying, and then all things being equal, they're saying that having, like, how do I say this? They're saying that white students, not that they necessarily, they're saying that if we don't look at race, if we don't look at all of these things, right? Like, and again, and they take a holistic approach on purpose. They're not just looking at test scores. I think it's a completely different story if they were like, we're just going to look at test scores and we're going to look at GPA. If they were just doing that, I would view this completely differently, because I would be like, okay, but they're looking at your ability to play sports. They're looking at your ability to play music. They're looking at anything special in your background. I can tell you for law school, even, one, being an underrepresented minority did help, but also, like, we were all trying to pull shit out of our ass to make us seem interesting. I went to Zimbabwe and I started a nonprofit. I was a figure skater and I won 3 medals. I like anything that could make us stand out because that's what these schools want. And Harvard is no different. So they are looking at things that make people seem diverse, interesting, kind of people they want around, the kind of people that they think will contribute to the learning environment that they're creating. And so that's what this is about. This will have to be taken on a case-by-case basis, and a trend of racism will have to be proven and dealt with. I agree that's wrong. From my experience, Asians overperform, as do Indians in higher education and career in the USA. So when you say trend of racism, how would that be proven? Like, would you say a trend of racism is that, if Black students make up X percentage of the population, that like what? Tell me what you mean by that. King of the Hunt's response to that was that case-by-case basis may find themselves arguing this back to the Supreme Court and possibly a new ruling. There's also in mind that America for a long time has a fixation on model minorities, those Asian and Indian students that you mentioned. Yeah. A robust learning environment does seem very imprecise and could be used to endlessly justify race-based discrimination. Yeah, I don't like that's the thing though. Like I get it, like a robust learning environment. And if you are going to have the like it must end, it must blah blah blah, if you are going to apply like strict scrutiny and have it be like and add that it must end, it must be super narrowly like that is a hard standard to me. I'm going to say that. But I do think it's a compelling interest, and I do think the dissent actually makes a good point of like it is the least restrictive means because one, they do mention that Harvard and UNC provided a ton of data, analysis, witness, expert testimony, like everything to say that, hey, this actually is achieving our goal and that there is no race neutral alternative for us to meet this goal. So I really don't like that this has to end argument. I don't know why. I just those cultures put high emphasis on higher education, and they shouldn't be allowed to attend our higher education institutions. Okay, thanks for the reply, guys. What do you suggest? No, my point was that, okay, I want to try to catch up. My point was that Asian and Indians don't need affirmative action to get in. Well, the whole point is that they are being harmed by affirmative action. I'll give you my experience. So I'm Persian. California has a shit ton of Persians. So when I applied for law school at like UCLA, USC, Berkeley, I didn't apply to Stanford because Stanford was way too hard to get in. It's like number 2. The rest are like number whatever 5, 6. And they saw I was Persian. They're like, yeah, this is not, we don't need more Persians. It's not diversity yet, even though I applied to a higher ranking school on like NYU, University of Pennsylvania, Columbia, places where aren't California that don't have like an excessive amount of Iranian students. I had a better luck at getting into those law schools than I did, and scholarship offers everything better than I did in California. So like schools don't want like all of the same kind of people, but what the Asian students are saying is like, hey, we are, because you admit us, but once you feel like you have enough, now you're admitting Black students that perform more poorly than us on tests and GPA and stuff, and that's disadvantaging us because if you didn't look at race, there'd be no reason why you wouldn't let in more of us, than you are in order to let more of them in. They assume that because you're Black or Latino, you just automatically think only about oppression. I don't think anyone's assuming that just because you're Black and Latino, you are just automatically only thinking about oppression, or that you've been oppressed because members of your race. No, they're not saying that this is like the Black and Latino students are like, please let us in because of this is just what Harvard is saying they want to, and they're not just looking at that. Sotomayor mentioned that like they still deny like 2/3 of the Hispanic people that apply, and they still deny like a lot of the Black students, even the ones that are like in the top 10% of their pool, like it's not like they're like, okay, like you just anyone can get in. That is just one, like a factor that can tip you over the scale. Okay, let's see. Oh, we got a lot more comments. Okay, let me try to breeze through these. This all goes back to Martin Luther King's demand that we judge people on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. I don't have any questions for it, but I do have a big picture concern. I think affirmative action is like a band-aid trying to heal the wounds of racism, but at the same time, it's going to hurt like hell when you rip off that band-aid. So I can understand the issue, but with politicians, MAGA, and conservatives demanding critical race theory be removed from schools, I assume there will be negative feedback and culture later down the road. Yeah, I don't know what conservatives mean by critical race theory. Are they just saying we don't talk about race? Because critical race theory is a very specific thing that is part of legal jurisprudence that is like literally taught. The first time I heard about it was a philosophy of law class in my third year of college, and then obviously I heard about it more in law school. But like, this is not something that it's a very difficult concept to even grasp until you're in a philosophy class or you're in like law school. They're not teaching this to you in kindergarten. What people mean when they say critical race theory is teaching them about like slavery. That must be it. Tell me if I'm wrong. My only disagreement is that historically, race and economics was deeply tied, and while they aren't absolutely synonymous these days, the shockwaves can be seen even now in places where people can't get out of academic. This is very true. Very, very true. And we're going to talk about it in a second, but I think the Sotomayor had some really great lines about this. That is, equality doesn't she said something, I wrote it. Let me find it because I actually really liked it. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality. I like that. Okay. I don't claim to know. I was responding. Okay. Iran is so proud of you. Thank you. I'd like to have a clear sense of what affirmative action defines as race, because race is a flawed social construct that's been used to justify discrimination of all kinds. It makes sense to move beyond outdated modes of attempting to create equality when the real problem is how we're evaluating people with a fixed lens of who they are. And what's up with there not being a Middle Eastern Persian option for? I know this is like the most pressing issue here is that, but what they're defining race the same way the census defines race. So like Black, Hispanic, Pacific Islander. Like I was like, where the fuck is Persian? Like why is Pacific Island? Like, I'm not saying they shouldn't be in there, but like Middle Eastern should be in there too. So, there is the argument that they should just not take in race, they should take in class and socioeconomic status, because, a lot of the arguments people make is, oh, people of a particular race are from disadvantaged communities and blah, blah, blah. Well, you can still take in all that into account. You just can't take in race. Yeah. Conservatives have taken critical race theory to mean anything that attempts to address our history of slavery and racism, just like the woke now means anything seen as progressive. Yeah, they've definitely hijacked woke. It definitely refers to white men bad. All of America is nothing but race. Okay, tell me what they're saying to kids. Like, are they literally like, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, white man bad? Like, what do you mean? If you mean that they're saying white man bad because they're talking about the injustices committed by, I guess, white people on Native Americans, on African Americans, like, that's not like that. To me, that's not saying white man bad. That's saying here's history. White man did bad things. And now we're like, oh, you can't tell them that. That's saying white man's bad. No, you're talking about history. So most racist country that ever existed, tell me the teacher that's saying this. You guys are like just making this up, I think. Don't let white people speak in class. Who's not letting white people speak in class on certain topics, especially in grade school? Like, what white kid is raising their hand and the teacher's like, excuse me, no, Billy, you cannot talk because you're fucking white. Like, that's not happening. Critical race theory punishes people today. Tell me how. From what I understand, is a social analysis conducted on the premise that all institutions, even seemingly neutral ones, have a racist basis and need to be viewed with suspicion. So it's saying that even seemingly neutral institutions are predicated on a history that has not been neutral, that has been that was imbalanced. So what's seemingly neutral is actually working in favor of, that line wasn't Malcolm X said, like, if you're neutral in situations of injustice, you're on the side of the oppressor. Not a direct analogy, not a direct link, but somewhat like that. But this is not saying white man bad. It just, like, they're just not saying that. I don't know. I'm pretty sure it was also being used to basically teach white guilt and that you can't be racist against white people and shit. But I didn't pay too attention. What do you mean they're teaching white guilt? Like, if you're saying teaching people that you have had an advantage because of the history of this country, where your ancestors had way more time to accumulate wealth, you guys were not subjugated to terrible forms of oppression, you guys were not prevented from buying homes, having the same jobs for a very, very long time, you didn't have policies, even police policies, that negatively impacted you, like the crack cocaine, like all of this mass incarceration. So you guys have privilege. If you're saying that teaches white guilt, like, who the fuck cares? Like, I'm not like, oh, like, if that makes you feel guilty, okay, but I don't, facts don't care about your feelings. Isn't that something you guys say? When it comes to critical race theory, you're correct in a higher education subject, but conservatives make it a blanket term for whites are bad people and you should be ashamed to be white. Yeah, it's not, that's not what it's saying. Yeah, you're saying the same thing I'm saying. I just read it. Weird, but and it's not saying you can't be racist against white people. What they're saying is institutional and systemic racism hasn't affected white people. We're talking about racism on an individual level. That is different. When someone says racism, it's like an umbrella term, and you can look at individual instances of racism, systemic racism, institutional racism. And what they're saying is that reverse racism doesn't work in the sense of institutional and systemic racism. Oh, my ring light was just, let me attach it to the charger. Give me a second. Did that work? Oh. Did I forget how to do this? There we go. Okay. Inherently, that's not the crux of what it is. That's like Twitter's version of CRT. I love that. That is Twitter's version of CRT. Objectively, it's supposed to be acknowledging that for all the great aspects of America, the darker aspect cannot and should not be overlooked. It's not about blaming people for their ancestors, but making everyone conscious of their place and impact on people who have historically been discriminated. Yes, thank you, King of the Hunt. I wholeheartedly agree. Now, if I see an instance of a teacher like being like, you're black, you're white, you're like, yes, I don't agree with that, but I don't think that's what's I haven't seen any evidence for that happening. The streamer is too fast to discuss any question with Ernest. Me? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to catch up. Tell me what you'd like me to slow down on. I don't have much streaming experience, so I'm learning. The only thing I would say, put your hand down, to do is trying to speak against the lived experiences of POC, but countering it with your POV that has not even in a sense similar. Wait, what? I've been out of school for a good while, but being in public school during the 90s, we were taught history as it happened and brought up the topic of racism as it pertains to history and how it still exists in society. Never was I told to feel bad or ashamed because I'm white. Neither have I. I'm 28. I don't know how old you are. So this thing is like a new craze that they're saying happening now. And I guess you and I are not in school now, but I haven't seen any evidence really for this being like, they're being taught in way different ways than we were being taught. And they're like segregated by race, and the black kids are like telling the white kids to shut the fuck up because you oppress. Like, this is not happening. Women life freedom. Love it. Pin it. Okay. No, the places, no, not the places have a history of being racist. I think CRT was being used to say, if you're white, you're racist. No, no, no. Where are you getting that definition of CRT? Like you're getting like King of the Hunt said, I love it. The Twitter definition of CRT. Twitter is not the tweets from people that agree with you that don't know what the fuck critical race theory is not where you get the definition of critical race theory. POC are more likely to be killed by POC than by I guess non-POC. You're saying, yeah, I don't know what that has to do with literally absolutely anything. Feel free to explain. The stringent nationalism of MAGA depends on the rose-colored glasses of the past, thus make America great again, when in fact, POC haven't had that great of a time in the United States historically. Slavery happened. It was horrific. We need to remain educated about it. Like we need to remain educated about the Holocaust. Yes, I love this. Being educated. And you see this with the book banning. They're like, at first, like, oh, we just want to remove books that are like describing blowjobs to kids. Like, okay, but then we're removing books about slavery and like even like the Diary of Anne Frank, and it's like wait I thought that's not what you guys were concerned with. So what are reparations about? I actually don't support reparations, so that's a completely different. I'm talking about affirmative action in schools and I guess critical race theory. No, I don't know where you're getting reparations from right now. Oh, are you talking about like I thought you meant because there's an argument that I think California struck down, or I guess not like the courts, Newsom. But if you're talking about like, I don't know what you're talking about. But I don't think it's helpful to continually tell people they're victims and the system is rigged against them. It destroys people's motivations. Like, I mean, okay. When I was in law school, I was dating a Nigerian guy, and he did express, and I've heard other POC express, like they feel a little bit more nervous and anxious in class because they are worried other people see them as having just got in to check a diversity box, but none of them are like, I'm victim and I don't think affirmative action should be a thing. And they were all actually very qualified to be in the school. So I'm not saying that's why they got in, but I do think that sometimes that is a fear in schools, but I don't think they're telling them that they're victims. Like, I don't think that's happening. Now, I'm talking about the constitutionality of this and 14th Amendment, and I didn't do the research on this, but there is also research, and I have to do it, so don't quote me on it. I've heard, and I've also actually heard the opposite, so who knows? If we're talking about outcomes and the effect on this, some people argue that it allows students to get into schools they aren't qualified to get into, and then it's increasing dropout rates, and those students don't do well in those schools because they shouldn't have gotten on in the first place, whereas if they just were admitted to a good school that they should have been in, they would have done better in the end. But I've also heard that it's, increasing STEM opportunities and all kinds of. So I have not done the research on that, so I don't want to speak on it too much. Okay. Isn't that exactly their point? You just called it reverse racism, which unless you're talking about anti-discrimination, then it's just racism. Well, it's reverse in the sense that racism, like the systemic and institutional part of it, is, if you're arguing semantics, that's different. But what I'm saying is that it's been we can't say that white people have not been the oppressor and Black people have not been the oppressed when we're looking at the history of our nation. So that is where racism, like, kind of, that is the core of racism. When people were treated poorly for the color of their skin, it wasn't Black people treating white people poorly based on the color of their skin, in the sense, and this is what we're saying. So when we're talking about an individual level, white people saying, ooh, Black people are more likely to be criminals, Black people are more likely to blah blah blah, that had real world implications for Black people. Black people would be far more likely to lose their lives because of these stereotypes that white people were spewing out. Whereas the opposite is not true. The opposite is if a bunch of, Black people during Jim Crow era were like, hey, white people, they can't dance and they can't blah, blah, blah. There was a really great comedian. I actually want to play that clip if I can find it. I don't know how to play it. I don't know how to find it, but moderators who know how to do that, just look up probably on YouTube reverse racism comedy, and he's like, oh yeah, reverse racism could be a thing if we like go back to the past and we get in a time machine before Europe colonized the world, and instead Africa colonized the world and took all their resources, and then had enslaved them, had them work on plantations, taught them to hate the color of their skin, hair, and eyes, and adhere to tradition. Like, just goes on and on and on and on and on about all of the ways that these people have been harmed. He said, like, this is for Middle Eastern people, every few years make up some fake war to go bomb them into an oblivion, like all of this stuff. And then he's like, if after all of that, people came on stage and they were like, oh, white people, they can't dance, like, it would be, let me see. Yes, that's the video. I don't know how to play it though, so if you do. But and again, this is comedy, but I think that the greater point here is that it's you can't just look at racism as like, oh, your skin color, my skin color. It's deeper than that. I can put it in the chat. Okay. My moderator is going to put it in the chat if you guys are interested in watching it. Okay. Let me. Thanks for all this discussion, by the way, from everybody. Sorry, I'm typing faster than I am thinking sometimes. Who sold slaves to America? We're talking about the history of America, and that people were not considered full human beings because of their race. I don't care if before we were Homo sapiens, if so and so was mean to so and so. I'm talking about in the history of our country, right? There has clearly been a group that has not been treated equally because of their skin color, and has had horrifying consequences for that group, and it hasn't been white people. Okay, maybe American students should focus more on STEM than focusing on the fact that the world 300 years ago was a different place. America was a different place. It's no one's fault in 2023. Maybe there's a connection between the attitude and low admittance by AAs at Harvard. Well, actually, this is one of the things that people are saying affirmative action has helped. It's gotten more of these students into programs that focus on like STEM and stuff. Because their own people sold them into slavery does not absolve us of the crime of buying them and for treating them as less than human. That's the issue, not who sold them. Yeah. I don't care if a fucking half or a quarter Chinese, quarter Indian, quarter whatever, quarter Venezuelan person sold them. I don't care. That's what did we do as a country? Because these are the laws of our country. I don't think affirmative action would be necessary in Africa. Like we're talking about here. Okay. Nope. Anyone going to college as an adult sees SRT as racist garbage, taking valuable time. Unless you are going to law school, you won't study. Yeah, you won't study real critical race theory. These people have hijacked critical race theory and turned it into, I guess, all sorts of things. That's why I like to ask people, what is critical race theory when they're talking about it? And then sometimes they say things like, oh, it means white is bad. I'm like, yeah, they're not teaching that to children. Asians have been hurt by the racist affirmative action policies. I would say Asians have been hurt by it. I agree, but I don't know if I would call it racist. I know what CRT is supposed to teach. I just think it was being hijacked to teach other stuff. Like, I think we're idealizing the left here and assuming conservatives are only jumping at shadows. Well, I'm not. If you couldn't give me evidence, give me evidence. And maybe more than just one or two, like, just fringe, like, show me, like, where is the curriculum? Like, where in the textbooks are they teaching this? What books are they reading that are teaching this? What lectures are they teaching? What assignments are these students being assigned that you think indicates this? Because apparently it's just being taught slavery in general now, or reading the Diary of Anne Frank. Of course, I know what CRT is supposed to be. It's been hijacked. And I think it's been hijacked too, but by you guys. All right, B Hizzle. What time is it? Okay, good. George Carlin had a bit about how white people had no business singing the blues. What the fuck do white people have to be blue about? Banana Republic ran out of khakis. Okay, thanks for posting. So the YouTube link is in there if you want that. Are you cross-eyed? No. There's no justification for the enslavement of another person, period. Yeah, I don't care who fucking sold who to who. Like, what a weird thing. Oh, because you're like, it's like if it's like I was watching, you guys remember that cartoon? And for those of you that grew up religious or are religious, it's not a cartoon. The Joseph, his story where his brother sold him into slavery. Like, it's like saying, well, you can be my slave now because your brother sold you. Like, then it's okay now. Like, what? All right, your second Eugene guilt, white guilt by pointing out racial crimes committed by people of the same ethnic origin. Slavery as an institution has ultimately benefited white people, and systemic racism continues to this day. And yes, it favors white people over POC. Yes, hazard stamp, but like, who sold them in a completely different country? Even though we're talking about the laws and the treatment of these people in our country. Like, what do you think when we said they're 3/5 of a person, that we were like, we wrote the justification is their own people sold them. If their own people sold them, there must not be like what? I think what you're getting, what this person's trying to say is it's not like like slavery as a whole. If we look at all of human history, hasn't been just white people enslaving black people. That's sure, that's true. But in this country, it is. Right, but no act from anyone at any time gives anybody the right to discriminate on anyone ever at any point, because otherwise that's racism. You can have that viewpoint. Like I said, I'm not fully like the affirmative action is not one that I can really see both sides. But I don't think the people that are anti-affirmative action are doing a good job in this chat, because I vehemently disagree with all of these points. Streamer is a moron. A moron. Okay. Ask the leftist what CRT is. Will they tell you? I just told you. The replay will be available. Go back and watch. Well, tell us, what is CRT? I told you. And actually, King of the Hunt told you. We can even go back and pin his comment. That comment is not saying white people bad and fuck white people and white guilt. That's just explaining a theory as to our institutions and how they were created. I'm seeing a lot of Fox News talking points with no supporting evidence. I agree. Hazardston said, prove that slavery has historically benefited POC more than white people. No, Hazardston, don't tell him that, because he might make the argument that it was brought them into America and now they're so lucky that they're like the argument Candace Owens makes, which is fucking disgusting. Without us, they'd still be in Africa. She has completed law school, passed the bar, and brings us deeper topics than most of Twitch. So how exactly is she more? Because I don't agree with him. I think that is the base criteria. Like, yeah, bad stuff happened, but here now discrimination based on race is racism. Okay. He'll likely be at the other stream. You'll see him in another place. Yeah, he'll probably be in my Instagram DMs. There is one guy. I'm not going to put him on blast. There's one guy that you guys have seen on my streams. I'll tell the Discord, because the Discord is like a very select group of people. Hazerston, I think, already knows. There is like a guy that is in these streams, and he's always like fighting with us. He hasn't been on recently, but he was always fighting with us, always like blah blah blah. And I didn't even, and there was this one person on OnlyFans that was just like sending me like love notes every fucking day. Like, I want to fucking like kiss the ground you walk on. You are my angel baby princess cupcake. And I was just like, okay, whatever. An OnlyFans fan who is very animated and whatever. And then he was like, also, like, I love our Twitch discussions, and you know, it's, and he's like, by the way, I'm so and so. I'm like, and he's not the first one. I think he's the first one that was that extreme about it. Like extreme, like in the sense of the way he would talk to me in DMs versus here. But yeah, you guys. I'm a PhD in a science. I wonder what science that is. Also, it's funny because um, a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're doing OnlyFans. Like, wouldn't that affect your license?" And the things that people say, I wouldn't say this guy has said anything particularly damning, but like, you are far more likely to get in trouble in any legitimate academic, any licensing academy, committee, whatever. If you're online spewing racist, sexist hatred, ooh, because you have to understand these people are going to have, like, I'm just saying for character and fitness, for example. And I did have only one guy. He claimed to be a lawyer and he was saying all that. And so I was like, all right, I'm reporting this to the bar. And I realized he wasn't a lawyer, because no lawyers would actually come online and be like, call people sluts, whores, like talk about, like, even if they somehow believed it, which I think even if they, like, they can agree with this case, but this is how they're going to talk about it. They're going to talk about it. Like Justice Thomas and whatever is talking about it. They're not going to talk about it like this, because first of all, that's not how educated people behave. And second of all, it is a poor reflection of whatever institution you got your PhD from, and your institution. And again, I don't think you said anything like egregious, but calling people morons online and stuff is just, that is the part, in 2023, it's going to be hard for any committee to be like, oh, showing your body online is immoral and it shows a lack of character and judgment. Very hard for any academic institution to defend in 2023. But getting online and like calling people names, they might be like, yeah, no. And you apparently still want to practice in your field. I clearly don't. I can say whatever I want because people still want to see my titties. All right. Anyways, it's not our fault if you don't watch anything but fake news. Actually, if you guys want to know my breakdown of what I watch so much Daily Wire content. I can tell you what all of the hosts think on pretty much any issue. Because I actually try very hard not to go into my confirmation bias. And I would consider myself center left. I'm not even like super far left. I told you, I'm not even, I do think that it is disadvantaging people based on race, and I don't know if that's good. So like, I'm not sitting here even hardcore defending this. All right. All right, what time is it? Okay, let's go through what I have of the dissent. Yeah, he hasn't given us any facts or stats. Right, another CRT evasion. You want us to? All right, moderator, go pin King of the Hunt's comment on that. All right, Jazz, I think some people are getting their jimmies off by having you argue. That's true. Maybe we should just move on. Guys, I accidentally turned on do not disturb, and I didn't mean to. I didn't know how to turn it off. Okay. It's okay. Isn't your view on discrimination proof how CRT is being taught as a form of racism? Wait, what? Isn't your view on discrimination proof of how CRT is being taught as a form of how racism goes one way? What if that kind of racism just actually goes one way? What if? I don't understand. Isn't your view on the LGBT community proof that it's bullshit because you're saying gay people were unfairly treated? Like, no, gay people were just unfairly treated. CRT is an academic and legal framework that denotes that systemic racism is part of American society, from education to housing to employment and healthcare. Yes. Inherently, that's not what the crux of it is. That's like the Twitter version of CRT. Objectively, it's that it's supposed to be acknowledging that for all of the great aspects of America, the darker aspects cannot. Oh yeah, okay. This is what CRT is. Okay. There is your answer. Okay, and then Hazard Stint also put out another thing. So critical race theory is an academic framework that examines how race and racism intersect with social, cultural, and legal structures, emphasizing the systemic nature of racial injustice and the ongoing effects of historical oppression. It seeks to analyze and challenge the ways in which race and power operate in society to perpetuate inequality and marginalization. Where in this is to say white people bad? You're making that link, and you're going to have to tell me how. Oh my God, geez, Daily Wire, Jesus, you have bigger balls than me. Yeah. So nobody can accuse me of only listening to news that I agree with. In fact, I hardly ever listen to news that I agree with, because if I agree with it, I don't find it as interesting. I had to listen to Sean Hannity in the car with my dad the other day. I nearly vomited. Candace is like my favorite because she's like so crazy and she just says things with such like conviction that she just thinks it makes it true. She's like so animated over like the dumbest shit. Like she's like, someone on Instagram that was pregnant showed their belly. It's fucking disgusting, degenerate. I hate us all. Like it just, I'm like, okay. Listen, I'm not against doing the legal legwork to help you see a viewpoint. I just need to be willing to read and have a discussion instead of stonewalling because you are set in your views. I'm fine with seeing the plight of others, but I'm not fine with fighting dialogue. Yeah. The chat is too fast. Can you repost? I love to read. All right. The chat is not too fast for anyone but you. I'm not trying to be mean, but you have access to the internet. And I know that because you're watching me. So you can look up what critical race theory is, but we can't keep it up on the screen for your little pea brain to have enough time to read it because there are other people in here, people that are far more able to engage in a little bit of a deeper conversation than perhaps you are. And so we're not going to cater this all to you. If that makes me a moron or a bad streamer, so be it. You are here. You don't have to be here. No, snowflakes. You seem like the snowflake because you're triggered that we're not all catering our stream to you. I don't believe you watch Daily Wire. You can't be ignorant to what's going on with CRT schools and watch Daily Wire, like you say. You guys, literally, if I even go on my YouTube right now, like I guarantee you, like if I go to my recommended, it's going to have at least something. There we go. Matt Walsh right here on my home. Like I'm not kidding. Peterson right under it. Right now I've been looking a lot at the podcast I'm going to be on. So I'm seeing more of that. Here, Daily Wire Plus. Right here on my recommended. Your recommended is clearly based on things that you watch. And I unfortunately do watch some of that. So, sorry. Okay, guys, so here is your chin is fucked up and you are 5 out of 10. This is worth resorting to. All right, let's move forward. Yeah, I think that's just he lost. You'd sell your sister for 11 likes on Instagram, wouldn't you? This is really. These aren't even ad hominem attacks because they're just random. It's like me being like, you would fucking kill your mom, wouldn't you? Like, mods are patient. I would have. We won't ban him unless he keeps going. Oh, now I need to be banned. The content creator needs to be banned. I'm the snowflake, but you think I should be banned? What's your basis? Why should I be canceled or banned? Pat Walsh is I think Matt Walsh is a terrible fucking person, and I think Matt Walsh just wants really badly to be fucked in the ass. That's what I think. But apparently I should be banned because I don't agree with Dauber Fob. Okay. Okay, let's get into the dissent. We have 15 minutes for that. I think my sister's watching the stream from downstairs. She's I look good in purple. All right. I'm gonna go really quickly over. I didn't read. I only read Sotomayor's dissent, and I only read part of it. So I won't be able to explain this with the same level of detail and knowledge that I did the majority. Now her chin is kind of cute, but watching her wreck Dauber is just wonderful. Twitch rules, Twitch rules. So what about California? Okay, we will address that if we have time. I'm going to get through this for people that have that are interested in this case. Okay, so basically, Sotomayor talks about how the majority is kind of using a cherry picked historic telling of equal protection in Brown v. Board of Education. So they're talking about how Brown really promulgated a racial diversity for schools and more inclusivity in schools, and integration is key. So she writes that the desegregation cases that followed Brown confirmed that the ultimate goal of that seminal decision was to achieve a system of integrated schools that ensured racial equality of opportunity, not to impose a formalistic rule of race blindness. In Green v. School Board of New Kent, for example, the court held that New Kent County Schools Board freedom of choice plan, which allegedly allowed every student, regardless of race, freely choose the school he would attend, was insufficient to effectuate the command of Brown. That command, the court explained, was that schools dismantled well-entrenched dual system. I'm laughing because I just know this is like the people, like, they're not understanding this. Okay, sorry. This is like way over their head. And transition to a unitary, non-racial system of public education. And that the board opened the doors of the former white school to Black children and the Black school to white children on a race-blind basis was not enough. Passively eliminating race classification did not suffice when de facto segregation persisted. Noting 85% of Black children in the school system were still attending all Black schools. Instead, the board was clearly charged with the affirmative duty to take whatever steps might be necessary to convert to a unitary system in which racial discrimination would be eliminated root and branch. Affirmative steps, the court held, are constitutionally necessary when mere formal neutrality cannot achieve Brown's premise of racial equality. So what they're saying is Brown is talking about the importance of integration and racial equality. And it's not just like, okay, well, now Black kids can go to this school and this could go to that school. No, they said you guys have to, you can't just, do that and then just all the white kids live here and all the Black kids, because that just does the same thing. It's de facto segregation. So they made them affirmatively take steps to make sure that their schools were integrated. I guess the pushback on this would be like, well, that was necessary then, it's not necessary now. But then the people on the pro-affirmative action side would say, no, that's still necessary now. And then they're like, well, when will it end? And I get that. I get all that. Okay. Next. I want to read the chat. Guys, I think you're super funny. You should really into that more. You could be a famous comedian. I don't think I'm that funny. Maybe I could be like a streamer. Let me see. All right, great. So people who are more notable during that aren't popular can exist and access anywhere, and they are the loudest and the most attention paid. Does that mean they are majority that hold the view? They are just the ones who get heard first and usually the most. And yeah, people that, well, in this, like, you guys are coming, like people that have been here a while and actually engaging, they usually just come in. People who are angry and upset are obviously more likely to engage and comment. I mean, this is just this is just like a fact that we've even in psychology, like the more upset you are, like if you don't like a product, you're more likely to write a negative review than if you like a product. So comment sections are never indicative of what people actually think. Like Andrew Tate used this in the BBC interview. He's like, look at my comments. Like the comments don't like you. Candace Owens uses this. The right wing loves to use the comment section as like a fucking empirical study of what people think about a situation. It's absolutely not true. Like even when I'm streaming on, like going on TikTok live and there's like 2,000 people watching and 10 people are commenting, people are more inclined to comment when they have something negative to say over when they have something positive to say. This isn't always the case. People still compliment. If you're here because you want to engage in the conversation, that's different. But comment sections are never, I would never say that is how people actually feel. And you're obviously going to get very different comment sections. Like if you look at it, if you're watching a debate and you look at the person who posted the debate, a lot of the time, they both post a debate and the comment section is filled with their followers. The person's followers, person A's followers are going to think person A won the debate. Person B's followers are going to think person B won the debate. But anyways, all right, I'm out. Can't blame Jazz for acting ignorant to a lot of stuff while claiming to be partly right. I never said I was partly right wing. So it was center, like left, libertarian left. I just said I watch right-wing content, so I am very familiar with their viewpoints and their arguments, and I actually don't find them compelling enough to go into the right wing. Today's climate issue would have to be the MAGA OnlyFans Persian girl to express any of these views openly with courtesy. Really? I think if I was the MAGA OnlyFans Persian girl, I would fucking kill it. I'm just not intellectually dishonest enough to do that. Have you guys seen like these girls on like that are the right way, like Miss Pearly or whatever, like all of those type of people, like they're like, if I got on and I was like, women should like stay home and cook, like I could do amazing. Okay. People in your chat are angry, you're angry. Libertarianism, the best non-religious example of the no true Scotsman fallacy, is one giant purity test with 87 million factions claiming they're the real libertarians. Yeah, that's why. I mean, when I took the political, okay, what the fuck? I don't even know how to get back to where I was. Okay. People who comment are angry. People who are angry are more likely to comment. Do you not know how to read or like hear? I guess because I didn't write that. Also, I want to finish. Got 8 minutes before the fun live. I'm not intellectually dishonest enough to do that. Typical conservative. See this echo chamber says I'm right about my views. How can I be wrong? They're not even in an echo chamber in here. And I've never said that they're wrong because more people in the chat think that they're wrong than they're right. I don't argue like that because I'm not a fucking idiot. I'm saying they're wrong, and I'm telling because their arguments are bad, not because not enough people agree with them in this chat. There's always one on the podcast giving me brain rot. That's what my moderator said. Jafar isn't your natural surname, correct? Yes. Where is this leading to? Who knows? With him, it could be anything. He could be like, so you are intellectually dishonest. All right, anyways. They talk about also the 2 cases or the multiple cases. They also bring up Fisher. Sotomayor brings up Fisher and what's the name? Bakke is what I'm going to call it. Bakke. Racially integrated schools improve cross-racial understanding, break down racial stereotypes, and ensure that students obtain the skills needed in today's increasing global marketplace through exposure to widely diverse people, cultures, ideas, and viewpoints. That's from those cases. I don't know which case, but one of those cases. More broadly, inclusive institutions that are visibly open to talented and qualified individuals of every race and ethnicity instill public confidence in the legitimacy and integrity of those institutions and the diverse set of graduates that they cultivate. That is particularly true in the context of higher education, where colleges and universities play a critical role in maintaining the fabric of society and serve as the training ground for a large number of our nation's leaders. It is thus the objective of the highest order, a compelling interest indeed, that universities pursue the benefits of racial diversity and ensure the diffusion of knowledge and opportunity is available to students of all races. So they're saying this is compelling. This is compelling. Schools need this ability. Consistent with the First Amendment, schools' student body diversity allows students to promote the robust exchange of ideas, which discovers truth out of a multitude of tongues rather than through any kind of authoritative selection. You knew it, what? Jafar isn't your surname, correct? I said, no. Most people don't use their real names online. It's a privacy and safety concern. He's like, I knew it. All right. Today, the court concludes that indifferences to race is the only constitutionally permissible means to achieve racial equality in college admissions. The interpretation of the 14th Amendment is not only contrary to precedent and the entire teachings of history, but is also grounded in the illusion that racial inequality was a problem of a different generation. Entrenched racial inequality remains a reality today. This is true for society writ large, and more specifically for Harvard and UNC students, 2 institutions with a long history of racial exclusion. Ignoring race will not equalize a society that is racially unequal. What was true in the 1960s and again in 1954 is true today. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality. So they use some stats. Almost half of all Latino and Black students attend a racially what the fuck are these ones? School with at least 75% minority student enrollment. The share of intensely segregated minority schools that enroll 90 to 100% racial minorities have sharply increased. Moreover, underrepresented minority students are more likely to live in poverty, attend schools with a high concentration of poverty, more likely to get suspended. They're less likely to have parents that are familiar with the admissions process, less likely to get preschool and early childhood education. They talk about the racism in these schools quite a bit. They're also saying that they're overruling those cases that said this was a compelling interest. And they're saying that that is undermining the legitimacy of the court. They just made, like, I agree that they completely made up that the compelling interest has to somehow now be measurable. I have literally never seen that in a case. And Sotomayor brings that up too, because I remember I read that obviously before I read this, and I'm like, wait, what? They also say that it is narrowly tailored because they did provide a lot of evidence. I didn't go through all that evidence, like an 84-page brief. But they do talk about how, and I actually put a little bit of it in here. I didn't want to. We have like a few minutes. They also talk about how they're inconsistent when it comes to national security. They said that they can't look at race alone, but they can look at like Mexican looking heritage is like a factor and stuff. So they're like, the court seeks cover behind a unique measurability requirement of its own creation. None of the court's precedents. Oh wait, no, that's not the one. Yeah, so they're saying that they are colorblind sometimes and not other times. But then what I was saying earlier about the needing it to be measurable, I put this little quote from the dissent. The court seeks cover behind a unique measurability requirement of its own creation. None of this court's precedents, however, requires a compelling interest meets some threshold level of precision to be deemed sufficiently compelling. In fact, the court has recognized plenty as compelling plenty of interests that are equally or more amorphous, including the intangible interest in preserving public confidence in judicial integrity on the interest that does not easily reduce to precise definition. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Is this the end? No, I don't think we have time. And they're also saying like kind of what I said. So they're talking about they're doing holistic admissions, but now they're only taking out race, but they're not taking out all the other things like athletes, artists, scientists, musicians, socioeconomic status. All of that is still allowed, but just race isn't. By singling out race, the court imposes special burden on racial minorities for whom race is a crucial component of their identity. Holistic admissions require truly individualized consideration of the whole person. By foreclosing racial considerations, colorblindness denies those who racially self-identify the full expression of their identity and treats racial identity as inferior among other forms of social identity. Fair point. And then kind of what I said really briefly earlier, that they're like, oh, but you can put it in an essay how it like impacted your identity and character and blah blah blah. It's like, to me, it's like, okay, then you're saying that it does, because you could do that with socioeconomic status too. Are you going to say they can't put in socioeconomic status when they're trying to get a diverse student body, but the person can write about it in their essay? Like, it's just inconsistent. So I do agree with that. And the reason for the inconsistency, however, is I think this is true, that there is race is a special class and it's treated as a special class. And because of that, there is a higher burden to discriminate on the basis of race. Now, I think practically speaking, it creates some problems, but that is why race is treated differently. All right, let's see. All right, so we're talked about. All right, Dauber, Fob, whatever. We can't sit here and talk about Kyle Rittenhouse right now. He's just like off. He thinks that I'm just like here to have a one-on-one chat with him. Let's see. The other stream is gonna start soon. Any final thoughts? Jasmine00, you are a racist. All right. Absolutely. Where there's a legitimate cause for alarm, for concern, they should be investigated and addressed before passing judgment on anyone. Yes. The issue is that qualities like learning how to critically research and learn is taught at as higher learning, which is considered woke, so the right won't engage with the needed discipline. Okay, we're talking about CRT. All right. I do have to get to the next stream, but I hope you guys learned something. JasmineJafar.me. I will be here next week. The week after, I have to see if I can. Maybe I'll do a stream with Lana. We shall see. I think we should further this conversation next week. Hopefully more people will constructively add to the conversation rather than troll. Yeah, Dauber, I don't like to ban people, but Dauber Fab is just like saying the most like random shit. Like it's just not even. I will engage Matt Walsh level of egregiousness, but Dauber Fobby or whatever is Dobby is too far. Okay. Anyways, if you guys are interested in seeing a different kind of stream, meet me there, and I will see you guys next week. I did learn. Thank you for the stream. Persian Emperor and these fake accounts is going wild. I think Pigeon Emperor was a little bit better than him. He might have been radicalized by this stream. So let's wish him well. If you guys remember my stream on free will, this is an exercise of this is an opportunity for us to be grateful, because he has no choice but to be stupid, and we didn't do anything to just not be stupid. Like that is part of our genetic makeup, being just more intelligent, not being as angry, having less miserable lives. Like I'm not going to take that as something I'm going to take credit for. I'm going to take it as gratitude, and he was unlucky while we were lucky. Okay. Anyways,